Alright, so just about finished up with this front shape here. Now, before I mirror from this half to the back half, I want to make sure that the edges and vertices that I have running right down here in the center are nice and even and exactly on this center line here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn off my live tool so that I can select these vertices. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take all of these vertices right here, make sure you're not selecting these ones over here on the side, so that run right down this line that we're going to mirror across. I'm going to switch over to a side view. Okay, so what I want is I want all of these vertices to line up with this line right here. So first I got to make sure that they're all even and straight. Now, instead of having to kind of pull all of these over and eyeball them, a nice little trick here is we can go ahead and grab them. I'm going to hit R to scale. I'm just going to scale them all together in the Z direction. Okay, you'll notice as I start to do that and scale it towards the middle, they're all going to form this straight line here. Okay, so I know that they're all lined up. And then I'm going to grab them, once I've done that, all together. I'm just going to move them back a little bit. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm just going to get it as close to that line as I can. And something like that should be good. Okay, so once I've set up that line of symmetry here, I'm going to go back to object mode, switch back to my perspective. Okay, and let me go ahead and turn off my image plane real quick so we can see what's going on here. Okay, so with this object selected, I'm going to hold down spacebar, or I can come up here to the top and go to mesh, and I'm going to select mirror. Okay, now watch what happens by default. Okay, so when I hit mirror, we're going to do this later on, but it actually is mirroring across the x-axis, so it's mirroring from the right side over here, or the left side, over to the right side, and I actually want that to mirror in the z direction, so I want it to go front to back. So when you mirror, you're going to get this little poly mirror option that pops up. Go ahead and change this axis from x to z. Okay, and then what you're going to notice is there's this value called merge threshold. So that geometry that gets mirrored back, it's actually going to try to weld together. And if that value is too high, it's going to create a much larger search distance for vertices to start to weld together. And I don't want these to jump all the way from this side and start to merge here in the center. I'm actually going to take that value and drop it down to something about 0.02. Looks like it works okay. Okay, you don't want it to move it down to 0. If it's all the way at 0, it's actually not going to merge these faces together at all. Okay, so they're going to line up, and it might be a little bit deceptive as if they have merged. I'm going to go ahead and just hide this real quick. But if I start grabbing these vertices and moving them back and forth, you can see that they haven't actually welded them together at all. Okay, so actually I'm going to undo a few times. Okay, so let's get this merge threshold back down to about 0.2. Okay, and then we successfully merged from our front design to our back. Now again, we're doing this because the reference image that we're working from has kind of that same pattern on front side, back side, so I don't want to have to model that twice if I don't have to. And then the next thing you're going to notice is if I switch back over to my front view, okay, I've got this line running down here in the bottom that when I built it, not real straight. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing that I did on those other vertices. I'm actually going to select all of the vertices along my bottom edge here. Come back to my perspective, make sure I've got all of them selected. Missed this one right here. And I'm going to hit scale again, so I'm going to hit R, but instead of scaling in this time, I'm actually going to scale in the Y direction. Okay, so you're going to see it's actually going to make a nice even line that runs all the way down here in the bottom. Switch back to my front. Okay, and I'm a little off here on this pattern on the side, but that's okay. If we wanted to, we could actually come in and start to actually adjust some of those points. But I'm not too worried about it. I can make those adjustments after the whole thing's modeled. Okay, so what we're going to end up with is, go ahead and hide this shape. Turn off my X-ray. Okay, so you can see we've got that nice plate here that we've built. We've mirrored it across this Z space here, so that same shape is here, and it's on the back side. Okay, now one thing that you are going to notice is that when we create a shape like this, polygon by polygon, you're going to see all these really faceted edges. So we're seeing the edges of each of these polygons. We don't want to see those. So if you select your mesh and you come up here to mesh display, there's this option right here called soften edge. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it's going to go ahead and soften up some of those edges on my polygon so I don't see all the jaggedy faces. Okay, so once you have that shape built, all we have to do is go back to mirror. So I'm going to come up here to mesh, and I'm going to go to mirror. So let's mirror this again. This time I am going to keep it in the X direction. Again, I'm looking here at the center, and it's merging these points. I don't want it to search that far to merge the points, so I'm going to look at my merge threshold. Again, drop that down to something like 0.02. Looks like it's working just fine. Okay, so that's going to mirror our geometry from one side to the other. Let's go ahead and turn back our other objects here. Okay, so now I have, I'm out of my live surface mode. It's a little tough to see because it's right over top of that. Let me just go ahead and pull him over real quick. Okay, and now we've got this shell mesh that kind of fits really nicely over top of our underlying body here. So it's, as you can see, it's a single plane, so we don't have any thickness to this mesh. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to grab that mesh. I'm going to go over here to my modeling toolkit. I'm going to hit extrude, and I'm going to extrude this entire thing out in the Z direction, add a little bit of thickness here. Okay, so let's hit 3 on the keyboard, see what that looks like. Okay, so now that I've done that, what you're going to see is it's starting to round out these top areas right here, so along these edges. And I would much prefer if this was a little bit sharper here, okay, and held some of that metallic edge that we have in that reference image. So let's check this out. And you can see some of it in the reference here, maybe a little bit more towards the top. Okay, so I'm actually just going to select this. Remember, when we use the multi-cut tool and put in edge loops, the closer edge loops are to one another, the sharper those edges are going to stay when we smooth things out. So I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to clip a face, an edge loop in right here, nice and tight. I'm actually going to put one back here as well. Hit 3 to smooth that out. Okay, and you're going to see if we compare the right side to the left side, how much better that this shape is actually holding its form. Okay, so let's go ahead and real quick and let's do it to the other side. Hold down Control, multi-cut tool. Let's put an edge right there. Whoops. And let's put an edge right here. Hit 3, check it out. Okay, and give it a quick turn. Looks like I'm getting, it's a little lumpy in some areas down here. I could smooth that out a little bit more if I wanted to. But overall, it's got a pretty nice shape here. Okay, so one of the ways that you can use that QuadDraw tool, not always for just doing kind of retopology, but using it to build some pretty complex new shapes, and all doing so while having complete control over how those polygons are actually going to flow, right? So we talked a little bit about that edge flow. So kind of seeing how this final piece has turned out, I'm going to go ahead and actually just delete this half. And I'm going to turn on this other one that I have here in my channel box. Go ahead and hide this egg. Okay, so for the most part, now this is the first one that I created that we haven't actually looked at yet. This is the one that I built without paying attention to edge flow. So remember I talked about, turn on my wireframe here, trying to build that first loop when I'm doing the QuadDraw, which is that row of faces that's going to run around the entirety of my object. Again, giving me a nice platform to be able to insert edge loops and understand where they're actually going to go around my mesh. This one, while the shapes look the same, I kind of just clicked wherever I wanted to. I wasn't really paying attention to that edge flow. Okay, so if I was going to come over here to my multi-cut tool and start to try to add edge loops in, I can still do it, but because I have, let's say, this row of faces that just runs straight down here, I've got a row of faces that runs here, up and over, around this edge. So again, I'm looking at this edge flow. It's a little tougher to come in and start sharpening up these areas because I don't have the proper edge flow for that to wrap around the entire object. What that's going to do is as I start to smooth these things out, turn off my wireframe mode, okay, we're going to start to see very definite creases where we had to put those edge loops very close together. The more edge loops we put in, the more creased areas are going to be. Okay, so I've only put one edge loop over here that runs around the entirety of my mesh to get a similar effect. And actually, I don't even have the ability to put one here, so I'd have to come in with an edge loop and clip another one there to follow that edge. Add a little bit of thickness here. I'll smooth this one out, and I'll smooth this one out, and see if you can see the difference. Okay, so all of those areas that I've had to come in and add edge loops, we're getting creases in places we don't want them. I'm actually not able to get this hard edge that runs up here because of the way that the geometry has fallen here. We've got all these little points coming together in this weird area. Okay, so that edge flow is super important. Make sure that as best you can, that first pass is kind of like a racetrack that you're going to see that's going to run around the entirety, the edges of that model. And then as you start to come in and kind of fill in the middle, it doesn't matter quite as much as long as we've established that loop that runs around the edges. Okay, so give it a shot, see if QuadDraw can work for you. It's not necessary for our subs, but in many cases, for some more complex shape is a really great way to go.